The silence of space enveloped Admiral Porter's command ship, the Argentum, as it navigated the outer reaches of the Zeta Quadrant. Beyond the reinforced glass of the cockpit, the cosmos sprawled infinitely, punctuated only by distant stars that pierced the void like pinpricks of pure cold light. Borealis loomed ahead, a silent sentinel in the dark, its surface a swirling tapestry of ice and shadow. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was tense, the only sounds the soft humming of the ship and the occasional crackle of static from the communications panel. Admiral Porter, standing tall and imposing with his silver-blue scaled skin, reflecting the console's light, surveyed the data on the holographic displays with an intensity that belied his calm exterior. "Status report," he demanded, his voice resonant and commanding, echoing slightly in the cramped space. "Approaching Borealis orbit, Admiral. Atmospheric entry in T-3 minutes," replied Lieutenant Kara, her hands deftly maneuvering over the glowing controls. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, aware of the gravity of their mission and the peril it presented. Porter nodded, his luminous eyes briefly meeting Kara's. "Prepare for turbulence. The storms on Borealis are fierce this time of year. Double-check the thermal shields and make sure the ice cutters are engaged. I will not have us turned into another frozen relic of failed ambition." Kara acknowledged with a brisk, "Yes, sir," and returned to her instruments. The ship began its descent, shuddering as it hit the outer fringes of Borealis's atmosphere. The skies outside turned from black to a swirling gray, the winds howling like ancient specters as they battered the hull. Porter gripped the back of Kara's seat, his gaze fixed on the forward screens. The temperature readings plummeted, a stark reminder of the moon's inhospitable climate. Suddenly, a harsh buzz split the air, and red lights flashed overhead. "Admiral, we've lost auxiliary power to Engine 4, shouted Kara, her voice tense with urgency. "The ice particles in the storm are denser than predicted. They're clogging the intakes." Porter's reaction was swift. "Switch to manual override. Divert power from non-essential systems. Keep us on course," he ordered, moving to the central console to assist. His hands moved with practiced ease, belying the critical situation. The Argentum groaned under the strain, its frame vibrating ominously as the storm's ferocity increased. The ice cutters whirred to life, sending vibrations through the ship as they began to clear the accumulating frost from the hull. But it was a losing battle. The temperature outside dipped further, ice forming faster than it could be removed. "We're not going to make it through the storm at this rate," Kara said, her voice edged with panic. "Hull integrity is at 70% and dropping." Porter's mind raced. Losing the ship was not an option. Not here, not on the threshold of their objective. "Angle us downward. We'll use the planet's gravity to slingshot us out of the storm. It's risky, but it might just give us the momentum we need." Kara input the commands, and the ship lurched, tilting precariously as it skirted the denser clouds. For a moment it seemed they would clear the storm, but then a violent shudder ran through the ship, a deep, wrenching groan of metal that spelled doom. "We've hit a ridge. Brace for impact." Kara's warning was almost drowned out by the sound of tearing metal. The world turned into a blur of motion and noise as the Argentum crashed into the icy surface of Borealis. The impact was colossal, throwing Porter against his restraints, his body battered but unbroken. As the dust settled and the sounds of destruction faded into eerie silence, he released his harness and surveyed the damage. The cockpit was a mess of sparks and broken panels, but it had held. They were down, yes, but not defeated. With a heavy sigh, Porter activated his comlink, his voice calm but firm. "This is Admiral Porter. All hands report status. Prepare for surface operations. We are not done here, not by far." Outside, the icy winds of Borealis howled as if in challenge. Chapter 2. A Fragile Alliance. The icy winds of Borealis shrieked like banshees across the barren landscape, weaving through jagged ice formations and around the stark wreckage of the Argentum. Inside the crippled vessel, the air was tense, filled with a thick silence that followed the initial chaos of the crash. Admiral Porter stood by the cracked viewport, staring out at the haunting beauty of the icy moon. His mind was a vortex of thoughts, planning the next steps, considering the bleak odds. "We've stabilized the core, but there's significant damage to the hull, sir," reported Lieutenant Kara, her voice cutting through the stillness. She was projecting a holographic map of their surroundings and the estimated positions of critical resources they would need for repairs and survival. "Good work, Lieutenant. Keep monitoring the core temperatures. We can't afford a meltdown," Porter replied, his voice steady, betraying none of the concern that knotted his stomach. As they discussed their dire situation, a faint signal beeped through the comm system. A distress beacon, not from their own ship, but unmistakably human. Porter's eyes narrowed, and a calculated glimmer of opportunity replaced the shadow of concern. Humans on Borealis meant complications, but also potential resources and, given their own dire straits, perhaps necessary allies. "Kara, pinpoint that signal. Prepare a team for reconnaissance. We need to know if they're friend or foe," Porter commanded, his decision made in the moment's necessity. A small crew of Kirans, cloaked in specialized environmental suits, trudged through the snow-laden plains towards the signal's origin. The world outside was a kaleidoscope of whites and blues, beautiful but deadly. Each breath felt like inhaling needles, the cold stabbing through their suits with every gust of the merciless wind. As they neared the signal's location, the silhouette of another crashed ship loomed through the blizzard. Sleek, metallic, and undeniably human. Wary of an ambush, Porter signaled his team to fan out, their movements silent amidst the howling winds. Just as they prepared for a potential confrontation, a figure emerged from the storm, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. It was a human, clad in a similar but distinctly less robust environmental suit. His face, partially visible beneath the helmet's visor, was etched with lines of fatigue and resolve. "Admiral Porter," the human called out, his voice strained but clear. "I'm Captain Ryan Pierce. I mean no harm. We're in a bind here, and I'm guessing you are too." Porter assessed the human captain, his mind racing through scenarios. Pierce's appearance was timely, perhaps too timely, and suspicion gnawed at Porter's instincts. However, the immediate needs of survival pressed heavier than the long shadows of mistrust. "Captain Pierce," Porter responded, his voice betraying none of his reservations. "This moon isn't kind to uninvited guests. What brings your crew to Borealis?" "We were mining hyronium when the storm hit." "Our systems failed, same as yours, I'd wager," Pierce explained, his eyes never leaving Porter's. "We need to survive this place before we can even think about getting off it." The wind howled between them, a reminder of their shared predicament. Porter knew the risks of trusting humans, their histories marked by conflict and competition. Yet the immediate need for survival superseded historical grievances. "Very well, Captain. We'll form a temporary alliance. Help us repair our communications array, and we'll assist with your shelter. But make no mistake, this truce is as fragile as the ice beneath our feet," Porter declared, extending a gloved hand towards Pierce. Pierce clasped Porter's hand, the handshake an uneasy symbol of their newfound precarious alliance. Together, they returned to the wreckage of the human ship, where Kieran and human crew members eyed each other warily but worked side by side under their leader's watchful eyes. As they shared tools and knowledge, a mutual respect began to form, tempered in the crucible of shared adversity. Amidst the echoing winds and the relentless cold, a fragile bond was forged, as unstable and as necessary as the very air they breathed. Chapter 3. Under the ice, Borealis was a realm of perpetual twilight, its skies a canvas of dusky mauve and frosty silver, echoing the icy vastness below. Admiral Porter and Captain Pierce led their joint teams deeper into the moon's heart, away from the relative safety of their crippled ships. Their goal was a nearby cave system indicated by the Kiran's geological scanners, potentially rich in hyronium, but fraught with unknown dangers. The landscape was surreal, dominated by towering spires of ice and gaping crevasses that plunged into darkness. Every step crunched loudly underfoot, the sound brittle and sharp in the thin air. The cold was a living thing, a creeping entity that slipped past every seam and barrier of their suits. Porter walked with the measured steps of a seasoned leader, his gaze sweeping over the alien terrain with both awe and caution. Beside him, Pierce moved with a restless energy, his eyes constantly darting to the ice formations that loomed like silent sentinels around them. "Ever seen anything like this, Admiral?" Pierce asked, his voice barely audible over the comlink against the whistling winds. "Only in simulations," Porter replied, his tone reserved. "Borealis keeps its secrets well hidden beneath the ice." Their destination soon came into view. A dark maw in the side of a massive ice ridge, the entrance to the caves marked by strange, luminescent fungi that cast an eerie glow on the snow. The light played tricks on their eyes, shadows seeming to move just at the periphery of their vision. As they entered the cave, the wind fell away, replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on their ears. Their helmet lights pierced the darkness ahead, revealing walls slick with ice and veins of hyronium that glinted like stars in the rocky firmament. "This is it," Porter stated, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "Let's gather what we need and get out quickly. This place, it doesn't feel right." Teams split up, with Kirans and humans working in tandem to extract the precious mineral. The sound of their tools echoed strangely, a chorus of clinks and clatters that seemed too loud in the hushed expanse. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Ice cracked loudly, a sound like gunfire in the confined space. Porter's head snapped up, his eyes searching the shadows. "Everyone out now!" He barked into the comm, the urgency clear in his voice. But even as he spoke, the cave began to collapse around them, large chunks of ice breaking away from the ceiling with deadly intent. Panic flared as both teams scrambled for the exit, helping each other over the slick terrain, their previous wariness forgotten in the face of mortal danger. Pierce slipped, falling hard onto the icy floor, but a Kiran soldier, her scales a bright contrast against the white, grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. Together they limped towards the light of the entrance, just as the roof gave way behind them, sealing the cave with a thunderous finality. Outside, the survivors gasped in the frigid air, taking stock of their numbers. All were accounted for, miraculously unscathed. Porter clapped a hand on Pierce's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of their mutual relief. "We need to move," Porter said after a moment, his voice firm. "This place isn't stable. Let's gather what we've collected and set up a temporary shelter. We're not out of danger yet." As the group trudged back to their base camp, the weight of the day's events hung heavy on their shoulders. They had ventured under the ice as uneasy allies, but they returned as comrades, bound by the shared brush, with death beneath the frozen surface of Borealis. Chapter 4: The Echoes of Treason. Under the ghostly glow of Borealis's twilight, the makeshift camp buzzed with quiet activity. The survivors of the cave expedition worked with a shared purpose, their recent brush with death forging a fragile camaraderie. Tents rose from the icy ground like pale mushrooms, their structures reinforced against the biting wind. The collected hyronium, a trove of glittering blue crystals, was secured in a containment unit, its glow muted but unmistakable. Admiral Porter stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes scanning the horizon where the curvature of Borealis blended into the starry sky. His thoughts were turbulent, mirroring the churning clouds above. The day's successes were shadowed by a nagging unease, the sense of impending betrayal gnawing at him more fiercely than the cold. Inside his command tent, a holo display showed the faces of his senior officers, their features set in various expressions of concern and determination. The meeting had been called abruptly, the transmission scrambling slightly as the camp's generators struggled against the cold. "We secured the hyronium, but the cost was nearly too high," Porter began, his voice even. our alliance with the humans holds, yet I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched, manipulated. Commander Talon, his second in command, nodded solemnly from the display. There are whispers, Admiral. Some among the crew are restless, questioning your orders, the Alliance. They're scared, and fear breeds dissent. Porter's scales bristled slightly, a visible sign of his irritation. Fear cannot dictate our actions. Whoever stirs this discontent poses a greater threat to our survival than the ice or the humans. As the meeting progressed, plans were laid to strengthen their defenses and to monitor communications for any sign of sabotage. But the seeds of doubt had been sown, sprouting in the furrows of Porter's mind. Later, as the icy night deepened, a figure cloaked in the anonymity of a thermal suit slipped away from the camp. Their movements were hushed, the crunch of their boots on the snow deliberate and soft. They headed toward a ridge overlooking a narrow gorge where the wind howled mournfully, carrying whispers across the ice. There, under the shadow of an overhanging cliff, the figure met with another, their features obscured by the darkness in their suits. "You have the updates?" The newcomer's voice was distorted by the comm device, tinged with impatience. "Yes," replied the first, handing over a data chip. Porter grows suspicious, but he's too focused on the Hyronium and the humans. He doesn't see the fracture within his own ranks. The second figure took the chip, their glove clicking against the hard plastic. "Good, keep pushing. If Porter falls, command falls to those who are more amenable to our goals. Borealis could be the leverage we need to renegotiate our standing with the Galactic Council." As the figures parted, a lone watcher observed from a distance, their presence masked by the swirling snow. This watcher, a loyalist to Porter, understood the gravity of what they had overheard. With a grim determination, they turned back toward the camp, their mind racing with the urgent need to alert the Admiral. Back in his tent, Porter reviewed the day's data when the flap burst open, admitting a gust of icy air and the loyalist, breathless with urgency. "Admiral, there's a plot against you," they gasped, the cold air frosting their breath. "I overheard them. They plan to use the chaos here to seize control." Porter's eyes hardened, the last pieces of the puzzle snapping into place with chilling clarity. "Secure the camp," he ordered, his voice a low growl. "No one sleeps tonight. We root out this treachery before it can fester further." As the loyalist hurried to carry out his orders, Porter stood alone, his gaze fixed on the spectral dance of the auroras above. The beauty of the scene was stark against the ugliness of betrayal. Tonight, he would face the echoes of treason within his ranks, and by dawn, the fate of his command would be sealed on the ice of Borealis. Chapter 5. But the negotiation. The winds of Borealis had calmed, leaving a rare, oppressive silence hanging over the camp. The stars blazed with an intense clarity, their light reflecting off the icy plains and bathing the tents in a ghostly luminescence. In the heart of this frozen tableau, the command tent stood, a beacon of flickering light and strained diplomacy. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, as if the electric tension from the auroras overhead had seeped into the very air. Admiral Porter and Captain Ryan Pierce sat across from each other at a makeshift table, strewn with digital maps and data pads. The glow from the holo projector cast their shadows against the tent's fabric walls, dancing as if alive with the weight of their conversation. "Admiral, we can't ignore the fractures within your ranks," Pierce began, his voice firm yet weary from the long hours of joint planning. "This alliance, fragile as it is, relies not just on our mutual survival but on trust. Without it, we're as good as dead on this ice." Porter's gaze was steely, his mind racing with the revelations of the plot within his crew. "I'm aware of the tensions, Captain. Rest assured, they will be handled. But let's focus on the immediate threat. The instability of this moon and securing enough Hyronium to power our ships." Pierce nodded, adjusting the display to highlight the geographical areas of interest. "Here and here," he pointed to two regions rich in Hyronium deposits. "These are our best bets, but they're also in the most unstable zones. We'll need a detailed extraction plan, and more importantly, a contingency for any unexpected complications. The discussion shifted to logistics, the air thick with the jargon of their respective fields. Extraction rates, payload capacities, thermal resistances. Yet beneath the technicalities, both leaders were subtly probing, testing the waters of their newly formed alliance. As they debated routes and safety protocols, a quiet tension simmered beneath their words. It was Porter who finally addressed the unspoken fears. "Captain, if we are to do this, if we are truly to stand a chance, I need more from you than just manpower and machines," Porter said, his voice low. "I need your assurance that your crew is as committed to this alliance as mine is expected to be." Pierce met Porter's gaze squarely. "My crew is committed, Admiral, because like yours, they have no desire to die on this forsaken moon. Let's not let paranoia undo what we've started." A moment of understanding passed between them, a mutual recognition of the precarious thread on which their hopes hung.
"We move at first light," Porter decided, his tone resolute. "We'll tackle the northern deposit first. It's riskier, but the yield is higher. We'll need that advantage if we're going to get everyone off Borealis." "Agreed," Pierce confirmed, his voice solidifying with resolve. "I'll have my team ready. Let's make sure we're not just surviving Borealis, but overcoming it." As the meeting concluded, the two leaders stood, their handshake firmer than before, a silent vow made beneath the unyielding stars. Outside, the cold awaited, indifferent to the fates being forged within the warm glow of the tent. Porter watched Pierce leave, his silhouette merging with the shadows of the camp. The weight of command pressed heavily on Porter's shoulders, each decision, each alliance, a gamble upon which lives depended.
Turning back to his console, Porter called up the security feeds, his eyes sharp for any sign of the unrest that simmered among his ranks. Tonight, he would set his plans in motion, the roots of trust watered with the cold reality of necessity. Tomorrow, they would face the ice together, a united front against the chaos of Borealis. And in the quiet before the storm, Porter allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The stars, indifferent observers to his plight, shimmered on, their cold light a reminder of the vast, unforgiving universe beyond the conflicts of man. But here, on this icy moon, those conflicts would decide their very survival.